U.S. officials are focusing in on how to address gun control as more victims are laid to rest today after the Florida school shooting. President Trump is spending President's Day at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, but the White House indicated today he could back some bipartisan reforms to the background check system in the wake of this most recent massacre.
The White House released a statement, quote, "The president spoke to Senator Cornyn on Friday about the bipartisan bill he and Senator Murphy introduced to improve federal compliance with criminal background check legislation. While discussions are ongoing and revisions are being considered, the president is supportive of efforts to improve the federal background check system."
The bill he's referring to is introduced by Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut after the deadly Texas church shooting last year. It's designed to strengthen the federal database by improving mental health and criminal record sharing between government agencies.
Over the weekend, hundreds of people, including survivors, turned out in Florida to rally for gun law reforms. They're calling for lawmakers to take up measures to help prevent future school shootings and threaten that if officials do not act, they will not be reelected. Erin Delmore is a senior political correspondent for Bustle.com, and she joins us now. So, Erin, the White House is signaling that it is open to improving or strengthening these background checks. Is this the most we can hope for from this administration?
It's not a broad or sweeping measure by any stretch of the word. You talked about improving, but what we're not talking about is expanding background checks. This legislation that's been proposed by Senators John Cornyn, the #2 Republican, and Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who was so vital to the cause of Newtown parents who stood up for change when it comes to gun laws. It's a combination bill. It's made its way through the House. But what it does not do is expand federal background checks. What it does do is it requires federal agencies to be more diligent about reporting the information they have. These would be things like criminal charges or domestic violence charges to the federal database that checks for backgrounds when people go to purchase a gun in some cases. But what it does not do is tell states that they must adhere. Congress just doesn't have that power. It can give incentives for the states, and it does do that through monetary forms and some other provisions and benefits that are in there. So there are incentives for states to better adhere. It requires federal agencies to better adhere, but it does not expand background checks.
One thing that's just been so different about this particular tragedy is we see that the students who survived the shooting, they are organizing, they are mobilizing. They got themselves on most of the Sunday shows yesterday, and now they're planning a march. I mean, do you think that this particular operation could bring about any change where historically we really haven't seen anything change after a lot of these mass tragedies?
Well, let's tick through the calendar and then let's talk about how this moment is different. On March 14th, the organizers of the Women's March are teaming up with these students to organize a national walkout at 10 a.m. in every time zone in this country. That's the 1-month anniversary of the shooting that we saw on Valentine's Day. On March 24th, these students are calling for a march on Washington. On April 20th, another nationwide walkout to commemorate the 19th anniversary of the Columbine shootings. They are committed to being activists in this realm. They've also spoken up and spoken louder than some of the other people who we've seen involved in these cases, partially because of the large number that have just happened throughout recent years and decades. This has become something that even the most progressive advocates and Democrats who are in office now will tell you they feel they can't make change. These students aren't jaded in that way. They don't feel they can not make change. They also don't feel like it's appropriate to not have their members of Congress protecting them while they're in school. And you hear that fire in their voices when they come out and speak.
And they are the voters of the very near future, certainly soon to be 18.
I firmly believe, Tanya and Paula, that this Congress will ignore these students at their own peril. I think when it comes to gun rights, when it comes to DACA, this is a group of people who will inherit the next country. They will make the laws. Some of them, when we talk about immigration, will become legal citizens, and they will remember how they felt about their politicians at this moment.
Very, very good point. Now, President Trump has been targeting the FBI here, criticizing it for missing the signals. Do you think that this line of criticism will lead to some reforms?
Well, you have to take that in two parts. He's criticizing the FBI for their mishandling of the information in the case in Florida, and the FBI did mishandle the information. We see that January 5th phone call that wasn't followed up on or wasn't apparently passed to the Miami field office. President Trump is hitting them for that. But what he's doing is conflating that mistake with the Russia investigation. He's saying, you missed that because you had all your agents over working on Russia. That's simply not true. It's the job of the FBI to protect the nation against mass shootings. It's also their job to protect the United States from election interference and meddling from foreign adversaries. This is something that it has the bandwidth to do both of. It doesn't mean the president should shy away from criticism when it's warranted, but it does mean that he's tied these two issues together incontrovertibly.
Well, some of his tweets, he also pointed out that there's no evidence of collusion in this indictment, which is correct, but it's not the final word on the Mueller investigation.
Yeah.
Does it help to go on a tweet storm about this particular indictment, saying there's no collusion here? I mean, is that helpful, or is it helpful to just sort of let people figure that out on their own?
I think there were 13 tweets over the weekend, and the president's favorite thing to say is no collusion. He's been saying this all throughout the case, but the investigation shows no collusion is different from the investigation doesn't show collusion. One means not ever, one means not yet. He's jumping to that first base when all the indictment showed was the latter. If he turns out to be right, I think he'll feel vindicated, but if something drips out, and remember, this is only a very detailed look at a very narrow part of this investigation. If something else comes out, he'll have to walk it back. You see him doing that already. He has called it a hoax, a witch hunt. Now he says the hoax is that my campaign team was involved.
Right. Well, he's saying, I never said Russia didn't meddle in the election. I just said we did not collude with the Russians.
And so that might be the pattern for what you see if more information comes out.
Right.
That's right. Erin Delmore, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Absolutely.